How many times do you date a man and wish you would have known the truth about who he really is a lot sooner? Isn't it frustrating to feel like that man strategically hid from you his true colors until after you got way too attached to him? Well, what if I told you there's a strategy to be able to get a man to reveal to you who he really is before you even start dating him? Which is why on today's show, we're going to be discussing every question you should ask a man before you begin dating him. That way, you're never again blindsided by the person he's been pretending to be this entire time. The way we're going to do this today is with each question that I give you guys, we're also going to state the reason for asking that question, because it's very important that you understand why you're even asking the question, right? You don't just want to be a parrot repeating back what I told you to say. We also want to make sure that in the process of you asking this question, you know what answer you're looking for or the key elements of his answer that you need to be paying attention to. Because with each and every question and subsequently each and every answer, you want to actually understand how this affects the future of your relationship, if there even is a possibility of being in a relationship. What are key experiences that made you who you are today? What you're trying to look for when you're asking this first question is you want to understand, why will he act certain ways? See, when you ask this question, guys are going to answer it, hopefully answer it by letting you know impactful moments of their life, okay? Whether that be impactful moments as it relates to relationships, whether it be impactful moments as it relates to their family members, or impactful moments as it relates to their work life, okay? I want you to sit back, relax, and let him explain to you what he considers to be impactful moments. Because what you're going to realize here in the process of him telling you all of these impactful moments is he'll start to tell you how things have shaped him, whether it be traumatic experiences or great experiences in his life. Now, I want you to be asking yourself this kind of question, right? When he's answering the question for you, I want you to be asking yourself, how does this impact him now and the person that he is now and the type of partner he will be? Because like I said, in terms of the reasoning, you want to make a connection to kind of see to yourself, okay, these particular responses he's going to be giving me on a regular basis, not because I'm a bad person or because it's an isolated situation, but because of these key impactful parts of his life that have really changed his viewpoint or changed his perspective. I'll give you an example of exactly what I mean by that. An example of that could be, let's say you are on a date with a guy who's been cheated on, and he tells you one of the most impactful parts of, life for him was experiencing the first time where he realized that his girlfriend of the past 2 years had been cheating on him. And realizing that was a really painful experience that made him, think really deeply and reconsider everything about what love is and what a relationship is, okay? Now, you have an understanding where he might say, this impacted me by now in my relationships, I'm a little bit more careful. Now in my relationships, I'm a little bit less trustworthy of people or trustworthy of my partner, even if my partner is not necessarily doing anything wrong or doing anything shady or inappropriate. Just because of that really impactful experience, I now have a little bit of a different way of approaching my relationships. The reason that this might help you is because now when you're dealing with this guy, you have a better understanding of what he's been through. So you have a better understanding of how to deal with him in a way that might work or may not work. But also when you do see some of these outcomes of this experience and how it impacted him, for example, the cheating, when you see how that actually affects your relationship in terms of his non-trusting of you, even when you're not doing anything, rather than you saying, oh, you're saying I'm not trustworthy because you think I'm a bad person, but I didn't do anything, and you think it's about you, you'll actually realize it's not about me, it's about the experience you've had in your past experiences and how those experiences have impacted you. So it leads you to a better understanding of that man, which is always, always good. Okay. Question number 2, what you're going to ask him is, what do you think is a really big misconception about you that a lot of people have before actually meeting you? Okay. Now, the reason I want you to ask this question, very, very important question, is because I want you to gauge his ability to be self-aware, right? What you're looking for here is self-awareness. Now, self-awareness in what sense? You want to see if he's able to understand the difference between his outward perception and the reality of his character. Because someone who can understand the difference between those is more likely going to be able to be empathetic to other perspectives outside of their own. Let me give you an example of what I mean. Let's say you ask a guy this question and his response is, yeah, one of the really big misconceptions about me is that people think often I'm a really serious guy because I come to work and I'm really about business and I'm very straightforward, and the way that I go about things, people think I'm like super box square serious and I never tell jokes. But in reality, when people actually meet me and they get to know me, I'm actually one of the biggest jokesters ever. I love to have fun. I love to laugh. I love dark humor, and all that other stuff, right? But people don't know that about me when they first meet me, right? This is a great example of someone understanding the reality of who they are as a person versus how they're perceived, but also being able to put themselves in other people's shoes and maybe see reasonings as to why they are perceived that way. Okay, there's nothing wrong with there being a little bit of a difference between the perception that of him that other people have versus the reality, but being able to recognize that will tell you a lot about his self-awareness. Vice versa, someone who lacks a lot of self-awareness and lacks the understanding of how they're perceived versus the reality of who they are would probably say something like, oh, I don't know what a big misconception would be. I am who I am, and I don't understand how anyone could see it any differently, right? Let's say he answered it like that, or it was just like, I really don't know what people's misconceptions of me are, right? It kind of speaks to a little bit of lack of self-awareness, because what you should be able to do, if you're someone who can put yourself in other people's shoes, you should be able to see, at least from their perspective, what you're outputting. Of course, no one's going to know your heart and know your soul, but if you can be more aware of what you're outputting, that at least means that when other people approach you or treat you based on the energy that you output, you're understanding of why they perceive you that way, right? That understanding also links to, I should say, more commonly having empathy. Now, obviously, it's not going to be one-to-one, but if someone can have empathy, that's also going to stem from being able to put yourself in someone else's shoes. Question number 3. I want you to ask him, if you were to actually meet your younger self, do you think your younger self, meeting current you now, would be proud of who you became? Or do you think they would be a little bit disappointed with who you became? I told you these questions are going to get deeper and deeper as time goes on, right? Because I want you to be asking some of these in-depth questions. They're going to give you a lot of context clues about this man, all right? The reason I want you to answer or ask him this question, I want you to get a sense of what level has he reached or accomplished a lot of the things that he wanted to become as a young boy. Now, I know, obviously, when we're young kids, we're a little bit delusional, meaning like we have in our mind, oh, I want to be president of the United States. I want to be an astronaut, right? And some of the things that we might want as a young child might not necessarily be the same things that we want as an adult. But however, even in a pivot, even if you're not the president of the United States and you're doing something a little bit different, it's very important to ask this man and get a sense of if he feels like that younger version of him would even at all be proud with who he has become as an adult, what he represents as an adult, the type of job he works as an adult, who he is as a person. Because what I want you to be looking for, I want you to be looking for signs of disappointment with where he is in his life right now. See, if a man knows, because this is something that might sound very weird and strange to you, because maybe you think a little bit differently. But for men, their sense of purpose and feeling like they've accomplished something and reached their goals is actually the difference between happiness and depression for a lot of men, basically all men, right? We're wired that way. So the reason I say this is because you really need to make sure that the guy you're exploring dating has a sense of accomplishments as it relates to himself, and feels like even if he's not completely where he needs to be, that he's at least on the path there and he's proud of the things he's accomplished so far. Because if younger him would be proud of the things he's accomplished so far, then that means when he sets goals, for the most part, he's reaching those goals. And in the process of reaching those goals, he's now accumulated a lot of accomplishments that he and his younger self can actually be proud of. Vice versa, if a man has been lazy with his goals, meaning he might say he wants to do things and never ends up doing it. All of those goals over the course of time that he set for himself and said he wanted to do and said he was going to do, but never ended up doing, will pile up slowly over the course of time. And as they continue to pile up, he'll eventually look back on all the things he's not accomplished and feel like he's behind, so to speak. So then when he thinks of his younger self and his younger self looking up and seeing who he has become now, he'll actually be able to see all of the ways he's fallen short in the past, right? And up until this point, in a way that accumulates itself to being like a disappointment, right? When you look at someone's lifespan, you look at what they've had time to accomplish, you look at their potential, and you're very disappointed with what they've actually accomplished. I love this question because for men, they're so purpose driven that there really is only going to be one answer or another. Anyone asking me, can I ask these questions over the phone? Can I text him these questions? What if I'm in a long distance? No. All of these questions from start to finish are for in person only. The reason for that is I want you to feel his energy and I want you to see his face and see his body language when he answers these questions. This question, I like this one a lot. How many people can you call on if you're in an emergency, in a pickle, in a bind? And I also subsequently want you to ask, who are those people? This is a great question. Because if you've watched any of my previous shows, you know that I always tell you, one of the clear signs that a man is serious or unserious about you is if you begin to meet his inner circle, i.e. his family and his friends. Now, for each man that you meet, there's going to be different people in his life that are the most important people to him. Those people also hold the most weight in terms of their opinion. For example, a man might say, oh my gosh, for sure, if I was in a pickle or a bind, I know that I can call on my mom and my mom will be there for me no matter what. If she's at work, if she's across the country, if she's on a boat, if she's on a picnic, she'll come and she'll help me out with anything. I can trust her to help me with anything. Even if I unalive someone, she's coming to help me, okay? Now, the reason I'm saying this is because that same person that he would call on in an emergency in a pickle is going to be on the inner circle. Meaning that same mom that he's saying he's so close with would come and help him with anything. That person is someone that if you haven't yet met, or he hasn't even discussed the idea of you meeting her, now you know you haven't yet actually penetrated his inner circle, which means you might not be as important to him as you're imagining. This can tell you a lot about how much of a priority you are, how serious he is about you, because this inner circle is the people that it really matters that you meet. For some men, right, this inner circle might consist of, oh, one of my boys, I grew up with him. Me and him, we go back to the sandbox. Like, he helps me with everything. I help him with everything. He's not my blood brother, but he's like my blood brother, So if I'm ever in a jam, if I'm ever in a pickle, I know he'll get me out of it, right? And I also want you to get that person's name. Even if this is a first date, this is information that you can bank in your mind. Even though it's a first date, I want you to bank in your mind, who is that person? What is your relationship to him? And the fact that this person is on the inner circle. Now, as you've banked that information, you can be waiting to see how close or far am I away from meeting that person? Have I already met that person? Have we been dating for 6 or 7 months and I haven't even sniffed that person before, or haven't even gotten close to having a conversation with that person? Because the reality of it is, if he cares about you and he's serious about building with you, and he hasn't introduced you to this person or those people that he would call in an emergency, he doesn't care about you as much as you're imagining he cares about you. That's just the reality, okay? So this is a great way to gauge that, to understand who those people are without necessarily asking him, can you introduce me to your family? Because that's the tricky part. He could introduce you to his brother, who he never speaks to. He could introduce you to his sister, who he's not close with at all. But the person in his family who he's the closest with, maybe he doesn't introduce you to, or vice versa, right? He might have a lot closer friendships that are like family and introduce you to the family, but not those inner friendships, which would be kind of weird, but I've seen it before. Question number 5. I want you to ask him, do you like where you work? Sounds simple, right? I also want you to ask, if you don't like where you work, where would you rather be working? And what would you rather be doing? The reason I want you to ask this question, even though it seems very simple and actually not very invasive or intimate, you're getting some very, very important answers here, especially for a man. You need to gauge the level of satisfaction a man has within his own life. Men who are very frustrated or unsatisfied, actually it's not unsatisfied, dissatisfied with their current situation in their life, that's actually not a problem. However, if they don't have a course of action or a plan in which they're actually implementing to change that dissatisfaction in their life, now we have a problem. Because I want you to be looking for frustration within this man's life and dissatisfaction within this man's life, but you also need to be paying attention to if he has a strategy in place that is actually working or he's working towards to change that. So when you ask him, do you like where you work? There's nothing wrong with him saying, I don't like where I work. But then he also tells you that, yeah, I don't really know if I'm going to make a change. And even if I do make a change, I don't know what type of change I'll make. I'm just very undecided. That's a man I don't even want you to explore a relationship with. Because I promise you, that same approach to just being in a limbo phase will directly translate to the way he approaches his relationship with you. Nothing wrong with identifying he doesn't want to be doing something, but he should identify what he wants to do instead, and he should take steps towards that. See, men do this thing, a lot of men honestly do this thing, where even though they can identify they're not truly happy, they don't necessarily know why they're not truly happy, and then they don't take actions towards happiness. They just stay in a constant state of unsatisfaction, dissatisfaction, and unhappiness without actually making a move in any one direction. Then you want to know what happens. They grow to be 50 years old. They wake up one day and then they have what we describe as a midlife crisis, where they realize their entire life has been wasted doing things that they didn't really want to do. And finally, when they become 50 years old, they come to this big realization that they now have to spend the next 50 years of their life before they pass away doing all the things that they actually want to do that they never got a chance to do as a young adult or a young man. This is a problem for you. Because now when he wakes up and he realizes, yeah, I was dating you and it was a vibe kind of for a little bit, but you're not really the type of girl I want to be with. I've always wanted to be with a blonde, and I've always wanted to be with a Polish girl, and I've never got it. Like all of this stuff, that same limbo, you will be shocked at how many men will even get into relationships with that same limbo mindset, where they're not sure if they really want you for you and if you're the type of woman they want to be with, but they're also not sure if they should break up with you or not be with you because they don't know exactly what they want. Limbo states are horrible. Men who apply this to their life, like their work and their career, will apply this to their relationship. Stay far away from limbo state men. I know you guys will like this question because this question will be related to you and his relationship with you. Question number 6. What is the difference for you between a wife and a woman who you would consider like a one-night stand? Like specifically, like what qualities would make one versus the other? This is probably a question I don't think any man will have ever gotten in his entire life. If he did, good on the woman who asked it, okay? The reason that I want you to ask this question, now you get to sit down in front of him and hear his firsthand understanding of what makes a woman, because it's not just gonna be, oh, one has a huge dump truck and one has huge yitties, because the reality of it is men will want a beautiful woman either way, right? Is a man ever gonna say, I would love to have a one-night stand who is unattractive? No. So now you just eliminate that question, automatically eliminates physical traits, because you're going to want both for both, whether it's a one night stand or whether it's a wife. Now it's going to force him to do a little bit more thinking, a little bit more digging within himself, and asking of himself what he thinks is most important inside a woman, not inside a woman like here, inside a woman like here and here, that would make the difference between someone who he would take seriously versus someone who he would not take seriously. Now, this is where I really want you, because this next couple of questions and this next section, I should say, you're going to notice a theme here in the way that these questions are proposed. I don't want you to press onto him what you think he should think. I want you to sit back and allow him to express what he thinks and what his perspective is. So, for example, let's say a guy says, I think the difference between a wife and a one-night stand is a woman who will shut up and agree with everything, okay? I expect my woman, who I actually think as a wife, to just be quiet, not say anything, not have any opinions, and just agree with me on absolutely everything. Let's just say, for example, that's his version or reasoning of what he thinks the difference is internal-wise. Now, we have an understanding that there's actually a misalignment between you and what you think is a wife versus him and what he thinks a wife is, okay? Which is fine, but I want you to see that firsthand. And you're gonna notice the theme in the other questions that I ask. Seeing the difference between what a man considers a good relationship, what he thinks he should be getting from a partner, how he thinks he should be serving his partner versus what you think that should look like is such an important realization. Alignment is so important for your ability to have a successful relationship with a man or not. If you find out very quickly and very early in your relationship with the man that the two of you are not aligned in places that are very important as it relates to how your relationship is going to look, you're already aware of the fact that you're wasting your time by even exploring anything further with this man, okay? So this question is going to kind of go at him a little bit, and I want you once again to gauge, what does he actually think? This is where you have to sit back and relax. Question number 7, what do you think a husband's responsibilities are in a relationship overall, in a marriage, and in a family? When you ask this, you need to let him sit back and tell you exactly what he feels is right and true. Because here you will learn a lot about what a man feels he should be bringing to the table. Like I said, alignment is big here. You should already have in your mind what you think is necessary for a husband's responsibilities to be in a marriage, in a relationship, and as a father. Once you have that in your mind, all you're looking to answer for yourself when you ask this question, are we aligned in the ways that we think a man should be responsible in a relationship, in a marriage, and in a family? Or is there a lot of misalignment here, right? Essentially, do I agree with this statement or do I not? Let me give you an example of an answer a man could give. Let's say he says, the question, responsibilities, I think, as a man, part of my responsibility is to give my half of the bills. And, when we're doing the mortgage, when we're doing the light bill, when we're doing the groceries, I want to make sure that when I go to my 9 to 5, I'm able to pay my half of the rent, pay my half of the mortgage, pay my half of the groceries and all that other good stuff. And you disagree with that. Great. I don't want you to correct him. I don't want you to tell him what's right or wrong. I don't want you to tell him that, hey, how you think about this and this perspective is the wrong way to think about it. It shouldn't be 50-50. Your relationship should be like this. You're responsible. No. What I want you to do is I want you to recognize that you and him are misaligned in what you think a relationship should look like, what you think a marriage should look like. And I want you to accept that as the truth and as a sign, because I know all of you love signs. You love signs, right? Accept this as a sign that you and this man are not meant to be together. Because the reality of it is the type of guy that you're actually going to be successful in a relationship with will be already aligned with you in what he thinks his responsibilities will be as a husband in a relationship, in a marriage, in a family, and what you think a man's responsibility should be as a husband in a relationship, in a marriage, and all that good stuff. You can also, as a pro tip, ask this man a question from the opposite perspective. What do you think a wife's responsibilities should be in a relationship, in a marriage, and in a family? Get it from both sides. You will also get a very similar answer in the sense that you'll be able to see if there's alignment or misalignment. Because if you know what you think your responsibilities should be, and he says, I think my wife's responsibilities should be going to work from 9 to 5, coming back home after work, looking after the children, making sure they're all done, picking them up from school, taking them to after school programs, taking them to soccer practice while I come home and I sit down and I chill, and, making sure she pays her half of the bills, and then making sure when she comes back, she does the laundry, she does the cook, then you have an understanding, we have a lot of misalignment here. Because that's not what I think my responsibilities are supposed to be as a wife. That's not what I think my responsibilities are supposed to be in a family. And that's fine. That just means that me and you aren't right for each other. I don't need to argue that. And that will be my clear sign that I don't need to be continuing to explore a relationship with someone who's going to a different point than me. Because you guys aren't going to the same points if he thinks those are your responsibilities and you don't think that. Question number 8. This is a great one because when you actually break things down like this, a lot of things that people won't spend a lot of time thinking about, but this will bring a lot of logistical elements to what a relationship and even a marriage would look like when you guys have children together and when you guys are living together, and how things would look at that point in your relationship. Because the reality of it is you date someone to get to that point. You should be, at least. So the question is, what would your day-to-day look like when you're finally in a marriage? Let's say, you have your wife and you have your children, and let's say your children are all in school, different ages in school. What does the day-to-day for your family look like? Take me through what you're doing during that day, what you think or anticipate your wife is doing during that day, and what you anticipate your kids are doing during that day. And I'm talking like from beginning of the day when everyone wakes up to the end of the day. Give me timings, all of that good stuff, right? So the reason you want to ask this question is because you want to see what is the vision here, right? What's the ultimate goal here? How do you see things going? Then you want to look for yourself and ask yourself, is there alignment there? Do I agree with that vision? Do I share that vision, or do I not share this vision? Let me give you an example of what a guy might say. Well, I'll wake up probably around 12. Hopefully I'll be working some sort of job that I could start at like 2 or something. And probably my wife would be going to work too. Children, they probably go to school. Oh, then you ask things like, okay, day to day, who's going to take them to school? Probably my wife's going to take them to school every day. When my wife comes back from work, she'll be tired. So maybe she'll only have to take the kids from school to their soccer practice. Oh, I hate driving. That's not my style. So these are the type of things. It might sound very strange, but when you have a man actually go through the day to day, you'll realize, oh my God, I will never be in a relationship with this type of man. That will never work. I can never do that. You might even be someone, let's just say for the sake of example, even in the vice versa, in the opposite sense, he might say, oh, my vision is for my woman to stay at home. And you're thinking to yourself, well, I'm a boss type of girl. I like to have my own businesses. I like to be out and about. I like to have my own life. I like to take care of things, or whatever the case may be, right? It's all about understanding, is there alignment here or not? If a man is describing his day-to-day and you don't envision that same day-to-day whatsoever, or in some cases it's the complete opposite, then you're going to have a lot of problems going into this relationship with this man. And if you don't recognize them at the beginning, when will you recognize them? When you're finally in this relationship and the way he wants to go about it is completely different than the way that you want to go about it, okay? Question number 9. What are benefits of having a wife? Again, you're not going to implement on him or press on him what you think he should be answering. You sit back, you relax, and you let him be honest with you about what he really thinks here. It'll give you a lot of context, okay? Reason for that. First of all, you want to have an understanding. Does he even see having a wife as an advantage? Because the truth of the matter is, I'll just be honest with you, some men that you will go on a date with, okay, whether you meet them on Hinge, Bumble, Tinder, in person at a grocery store, at the club, some men, truthfully and honestly, don't see having a wife as being an advantage. They see it as being a disadvantage for whatever reason, okay? I'm not here to tell you the difference between right and wrong. Now, if he sees it as being a disadvantage, once again, you will see discomfort on his face. Because when you ask a question like this, his thinking will be like, advantage, benefit of having a wife. I don't even see myself getting married. So now when you see and you notice this discomfort, right, that'll tell you a lot about how he really feels towards the idea of marriage and towards the idea of having a wife in general. See, these questions are great. And this type of question is great because you're asking a question that will directly apply to you without actually asking about how he feels about you. Because it's really not about how a man feels about you. It's about how a man feels towards a particular concept that will be input, whether it be you or any other woman in his life. Because one of the things you have to understand about men, relationships will never work if they're not ready for a relationship or they don't think a relationship will benefit them, right? No matter who it is, whether it's their dream girl or not. So what I want you to kind of see on his face and in his reaction and in his answer is he struggling to come up with reasons in which he thinks a woman as his wife would actually benefit him, right? Does it seem like he's lying? Does it seem like he's struggling to come up with answers or reasons or making things up just to make the time go easier, right? Is there a lot of discomfort on his face or in his body language when he's answering this question? Does he not even have an answer? Is he trying to avoid this answer? So this is great, right? Because if a man truly already knows why he's looking for a woman, why he's looking for a partner, he'll be able to tell you why it'll be a benefit to have a wife. And he'll be able to be very direct with you. Now, whatever his reasoning for why he thinks it's a benefit, you can then decide if you agree with that or not. So I'll give you an example of what I mean by that, right? If a woman were to ask me, what do I think a benefit of having a wife is? One, you have someone who will emotionally support you, someone who you feel is in your corner, that can actually have your back, that you can trust, like with your life, that you can trust with your secrets, someone that you can be honest with and get honesty from, someone that you can feel like you can actually be your real authentic self with, someone that will, all of these different things that you can go through with the person, whatever the case may be. I don't want to be here forever, but you get my gist, right? So now if I see there's benefit to having a wife and I explain that to you, or I show you that, then obviously I feel like that's something I want in my life because I feel like it's advantageous to me to have that in my life. Vice versa, if I'm a man and I don't feel like it's advantageous for me to have a wife, it's going to be a struggle for me to come up with these answers. If it's not advantageous, if I don't feel like it's advantageous for me to have a wife, why are you here? Why are you wasting your time? Don't waste your time with men who don't even think it's advantageous to have you around, because you are not going to meet a man and then convince him that it's advantageous to have you around and for you to become a wife if he doesn't actually feel that way. You have to recognize where you're actually wanted and needed versus where people will be very appreciative of you. Question number 10, what makes you feel disrespected as a man? Tell me and be honest with me. What would make you feel that way? What could a woman say to you? What could a woman do to you? How would she talk to you? What type of situation would happen that would make you feel really disrespected as a man? Reason? You want to understand, because for every man, there will be different triggers that will really make him feel emasculated. I'll be honest with you. You want to get an idea of if this is one of those triggers you do on a regular basis, okay? Let me give you an example of what I mean by that. Let's say, for example, he feels like one of the ways in which he'll feel really disrespected is if a woman calls him outside of his name, like calls him the B word or something when they're in an argument, right? Whether it be in private or out in public. And you know, if you're being honest with yourself, when you get mad and you get emotional, sometimes you say things and do things that you don't necessarily mean or you might regret, or maybe when you get drunk and emotional, okay? And you know that there's been instances where you've been drunk, emotional, upset, whatever the case may be, and you've called in that man that you were with at the time the B word when you guys were in an argument. Now we have something to think about, because I'm not going to say that you should throw the whole relationship away, but now you want to be very, very cognizant of what he just said, because I always tell you guys, right? Like the same way you can build a man up, you can really beat him down to the point where he also doesn't want to do anything for you and he completely shuts down on you. So when a man, before you get a chance to have to go through the situation, outright tells you the most delicate trigger points for him, it's best for you to recognize that, so that even when you're upset, because there's nothing wrong with you being upset, there's nothing wrong with you being angry, there's nothing wrong with you wanting to get your feelings out and be honest about how you feel. But even when you are upset, it's very important that you don't take it to a place that you can't recover from. Because I'll be honest with you, for guys, we're very strange creatures. So you might say one thing or do one thing in a fight one time or 2 times or 3 times, and you might think that it's over and it's done with when you guys move on from it. But he might feel so emasculated and so hurt by it that he never forgets it. And for men, unfortunately, even sometimes when they feel so emasculated and disrespected, they still won't be honest with you about how much that actually hurt them. This is why I want you to have the discussion with him beforehand, so you can already know what type of roadblocks to avoid so you don't even get to that point with him. Because trust me, once he gets to the point where he feels completely emasculated and disrespected and he's just holding that in, that grudge, you will be sleeping in the bed with a man who is holding like a crazy grudge against you, and you won't even realize it. It's very dangerous, okay? I don't want that for you. But I also want you to be aware of the ways that that could happen. So it's very important to have that conversation, because now we're starting to have conversations about things like fight language, which I want you to know about a man, okay? Question number 11, all right? What are some past situations that if you were able to go back in time, you would do differently? Now, I specifically want you to ask this question as it relates to like past situations in relationships with people. Now, I want you to recognize this because I want you to recognize some of his regrets, obviously, regrets. And I also want you to look for what may become patterns if you haven't already noticed them in your relationship with him so far. So let me give you an example of what I mean. Let's say a guy has a tendency to disappear. And let's say him disappearing on his ex-girlfriend for a week straight is what led to their breakup, right? Their breakup forever, or whatever the case may be. And he feels like, well, yeah, to be honest with you, at the time, I was really upset with her about something that she did. And rather than talking about it, I avoided her, and I avoided her for so long. It was 7 days, and that literally, ended our relationship because so many things just happened in that 7 days when we should have just had a conversation, and I feel like we could have worked our way through it. Let's say, for the sake of example, that's the answer to his question. Now, what I want you to ask yourself and answer for yourself, have you seen some of those same patterns in his relationship with you so far? Or if you haven't, put a pin in that so that you can be thinking to yourself, as we go on in this relationship, am I seeing that same regret that he said he wanted to change or adjust, not be changed or not be adjusted? Because now this will help you identify a couple of things. Now it will help you realize, okay, what I'm seeing here is not like a one-time thing. Because clearly this was the same reasoning that his last relationship ended. So let's say you're in now a relationship with this guy and you guys have like a small argument or whatever the case may be, and he disappears on you for 3 days. This is not an isolated incident anymore. Now you've just gotten information beforehand to recognize that this is actually a pattern of behavior. In fact, this pattern of behavior gets so bad that it can actually be the reasoning for a relationship ending. So now when you see this at the very beginning, rather than you having to go through all of the same pain as the past partner, you can ask yourself a question. Is this pattern something that I'm willing to deal with, I can work with, or is this pattern something that also for me will trigger me to the point where I can't even continue on in this relationship? So rather than having to learn from your own mistake of going through this a million times with this guy, you can learn from someone else's mistake because he secretly gave you this answer. And you can ask yourself, is this worth it for me? Or if I start noticing this pattern very early on, am I just gonna be out? Because it's one thing to identify the pattern, it's another thing to say you know it, say it's a regret of yours, and then never change it. Question number 12, what are some things in your previous relationships, whether it be your most recent ex or the ex before that, that bothered you, that either that person said, they did, or just of their personality, that you never actually told that person? Reason for that, men, we have a character flaw, a lot of them have a character flaw, where we find it difficult to actually express what's bothering us, especially if we become accustomed to just bottling things up. So it's gonna sound very weird, and you might actually be this ex for someone as well. But sometimes, and I kid you not, men will go through an entire relationship and there will be something that that woman that he's with does or says that bothers him like a lot. And he just never mentions it, never brings it up, never says anything about it, but it's bothered him the entire time. The reason I say that is I want you to then answer for yourself when you hear this from him, if this is the case. If he has been bottling it up, how severe is the thing that he was bottling up? So let me give you an example of what something that would be considered severe is. Let's say he's like, yeah, so one thing that I never really told my ex is that it always really bothered me how she had a bunch of guy best friends. And I never told her this, but I just never trusted her when she would go out. And so sometimes, I would kind of check up and spy on things and look at things, but I always had a lack of trust with her, and it made me feel very closed off to her. And it also made me feel like, when I go out, I'm just kind of like, what's the point? I should get to have my own female friends if she's going to have her guy friends and things like that. So why do I say this, right? It would be an example of like, wow, that's something really severe to be bottling up. And every time you're seeing the guy friend, every time she's talking about the guy friend, every time she's going out and hanging out with friends, you're feeling uncomfortable, but you're not speaking up for the fact that you're feeling uncomfortable. What is gonna happen at some point where you get to a boiling point where you're so uncomfortable that you just explode? I don't want you to be with men who get very comfortable bottling major things up. And unfortunately, what I want you to realize is this is a character trait. It's actually kind of like a character flaw. Yes, to a certain extent, men will naturally bottle some things up. Some men though will bottle major things up. And when they bottle major things up, eventually they get to a point where they have to let it out because it's been building up over the course of time. And if you've ever been in this situation as a woman, you know what this looks like. One day, randomly, you'll like not do the dishes or something, and then he'll explode and start talking about, 1 year ago when you disrespected him and how you never listened to him and he never gets treated like a man in this house and he never has any respect from you and how you degrade him and all this other stuff. And you're like, what? I just didn't do a single dish and now you're freaking out and talking to me about 1 year ago? That's because these type of men, they will bottle things up and just let it build and let it build and never address it, okay? So the reason I want you to ask this question is I want you to sense very early on if he has that type of character flaw. Unfortunately, it's gonna be very hard to build with a man who naturally bottles things up, because if you don't know he has a problem, there's no way to fix or adjust the situation, so there's no longer a problem, right? Everyone should get to feel comfortable, everyone should get to feel heard, but then that person has to be willing and able to speak up for themselves.